Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Past It Classics live show. We are just going to wait a few minutes while people trickle in, and also while I pull up the live show on another tab because I forgot to do that. Every time.
I realized that I had pulled it up on a tab, but I forgot to mute it again. So
So you just hear your voice all of a sudden.
one of these days I'll remember to do both, but not today.
um, yeah, I'd like to thank Cara again for coming out with the graphic. Work has been really busy for me, and Friday evening I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna do the graphic. And then I made risotto and then passed out on a risotto induced. So
That's
I
the
really
best reason.
appreciate that.
No, it's fine. That's the best reason I've ever heard for anything. It's like, I'm sorry I'm late. I ate risotto and passed out.
I was like, I had like a really intense like workout session where I did like Zumba and Pilates, and I was like, I'm gonna treat myself to a little risotto, and the little risotto became 2 servings, and then I was like, okay, it's time for bed.
I understand.
So
You
good.
gotta
I've been
listen
on,
to your body. Your body said, I need more risotto.
and then it was like, I need to go to sleep right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been on a risotto kick recently because I found out how to make it, made one good batch, and now I'm like, well, now this has to be an every week thing, and it
Yes.
can't be an every week thing because it's just rice and cheese.
I mean, nothing wrong with that.
But yeah, Cara has been such a lifesaver.
Oh,
And thank you everyone for being patient with our mini hiatus. There were like
yeah.
4 weeks where we were all just so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not to brag, but I was glamping in the south of France for work. um so and I did forgot to bring like north and south with me. I was like, "Oh yeah, 6 hours each way." Longer actually because we had layovers in Munich and then Portugal on the way back. I was like, "Oh, I'm going to blaze through this." Get to the airport, only one book is in there. I was like, "Well, cool." Yeah, Nana, I really enjoyed France. It was my second time there. I'd been to Paris before, and this time I was in Saison. Um, and it was for work. We were having like a seminar where we could get to know people because I work for a French company. So most of my coworkers are in France. Um, and yeah, I did have a layover in Munich on my way there. So, uh, which was great. It was probably the best layover I've had because the one layover I had in Munich last time I was in Europe was a disaster. I was just not traveling with like a good group and one
That's the worst.
I know the one of the people I was traveling with yelled at a German security guard for speaking German to her in
No.
Germany, and
No.
I was like so embarrassed.
Oh my gosh.
Our friendship like ended that day. I was like,
Yeah.
I how do you get angry at someone for speaking their own language in their own country?
It's like, this is why people hate us abroad.
I know.
You need to be a better ambassador. Ugh. There are some questions about the geography of your trip. They're like, Hannah and Aina are wondering how you had a layover if it's the wrong way.
Because a travel agency booked it for us for work. If I had been booking the trip, I would have just done like straight shot over to France. But we had a layover in Munich for like 2 hours, and then we had to fly from Munich to not Tucson, Toulouse, not Tucson. That would be wild. And then same with the other one, except we had a 5-hour layover in Portugal, and then we flew back to the US. I'm not a huge fan of layovers.
Yeah. I know it's like, I know that it's not always possible to do a straight shot, but if at all possible, I always try.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was trying to cover for Julia.
She's almost done. She updated us. She only has a few pages left. So we're all just chatting. How's everyone doing?
Yeah, I mean, I finished this book like an hour and a half ago, and that was a tight one too. I was like listening to the audiobook and I was slowly like upping the speed.
Not like the Artemis Fowl one though. There was like a couple live shows where all three of us are like, I finished this 10 minutes ago. Nothing's gonna top that.
Yeah. Oh, I should still be looking for quotes because I listened to the audiobook and it is impossible. Not impossible. I'm just not good at flagging quotes that I like. Because I'm listening to it and then I'll hear the quote and I'm like, man, what a good quote.
Wish I could remember it someday. Unusually for me, I actually listened to part of this on audio because I was working on a puzzle and I was like, I don't want to get too far behind. So I did the unabridged audiobook by Claire Will, which is really good. If anybody is looking for an audiobook version, I thought that one was very good.
Who was the reader? I don't know if you just...
Claire Will. Claire, and then her last name is Wille. I got it from my library. Julia's here. Dana called you out, Julia.
We were trying to cover for you. We were like...
No, not necessary. I own it.
It was, Hannah. It was a really good anxiety managing combination.
I mean, to be fair, I'm going to have to go back and annotate the last few pages. I like kept hastily grabbing a tab, just like, we'll underline that later.
Yeah.
Yeah. So for backstory, Julia came and she was like, oh, I haven't finished the last 2 chapters. And Cara and I were like, but those are like the best chapters.
It's like, you gotta read them now.
I just didn't want to delay things, but thank you for giving me the time and the patience. So,
of course.
Thank you for sharing, Nina.
Yeah.
East of the Netherlands, but in the west of Germany, they can't speak Dutch. Yep. I like learned 3 German phrases, and I was like, I'm going to milk this for all it's worth. And somehow I never learned the word sorry in German, so I couldn't even apologize to the security guard.
Oh.
Yeah.
But now we can get started with our discussion. So I know I already asked this question during one of my previous like live shows, but if you could introduce yourself and your channel. And it's been a couple months. So what's the best movie you've seen so far this year? And it doesn't have to be a new release. It could be something that you watched on DVD or like rented from the library. Ooh. So whoever wants to go first.
I think I'm actually ready because I see so few movies. So do you want me to go first?
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so hi everyone, I'm Cara. My channel is Wild Book Garden. And like I said, I see very few movies, so this was very easy for me. But I finally saw Encanto and I loved it. I've watched it multiple times. It's one of those movies where I'm like, I'm just gonna cry for the last 25 minutes every time, and I'm okay with this. But I love it. I feel Louisa in my soul. I've seen people talking about like the official family tree puts her as the middle child. I'm like, oh no, she has big eldest daughter energy. Like,
for sure.
I can't agree with you, Disney. But yeah, it's wonderful. I know it's like very hyped, but I thought it was well worth it. So I loved it.
I agree. It's a great movie.
Yeah.
I'm Julia. My channel is Shakespeare and Such. Theoretically, I talk about classics and historical fiction and all that fun stuff. But who knows? I do think pretty soon I'll be filming a 2022 quarterly wrap up of like the first couple months of the year and just kind of catch up on what I've been reading. So there's that. I like had a sense of deja vu when you asked this, Taylor. So maybe I've already talked about fried green tomatoes. Have I talked about fried green tomatoes?
Oh,
I can't stop thinking about that movie. It lives in my head rent free. So if I've already talked about that, I'll just move on and say the best movie that I've watched this year was a rewatch because I watched Titanic. I love Titanic. Titanic doesn't need me to hype it up. People know and appreciate Titanic. But every time I see it, I'm like, this is legally the only movie allowed to be over 3 hours. Like, it's entirely something you could have cut. I just love Titanic.
I love
So,
that.
yeah.
And I'm Taylor from Page Screen Taylor. I am, as you can see, on a very long hiatus with the exception of these live shows. They're the ones keeping me going. But I'm hoping to have a comeback this coming fall when I'll have more time to film.
Yay.
So I'm really looking forward to that. And I realized when I asked this question, I hadn't even looked at my letterbox to see what my favorite movie of the year was. But so far, I have to say it is. Let me make sure I watch this. Yeah, Last Night in Soho. I don't know if you've seen that one. I think it's one of the only movies I've rated 5 stars this year.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a horror movie by Edgar Wright with what's her name? Anya Taylor-Joy.
Yeah.
And it's like a ghost story, and it's scary, but it's so good. And a lot of people didn't like it, but I think it's fantastic and it deserves every single right.
Nice. It is on the watch list.
It is?
Yeah.
Don't watch it at night.
Well, I don't watch any scary movie at night. I made that mistake.
I made the mistake of watching the new Scream movie on my flight over to France, and then I was like, wait, I have to sleep. Why did I do that?
No.
So moving into our discussion about North and South, just to go over some of the content warnings that may come up. Death, off-page suicide, which I don't know if we'll discuss too much, alcoholism, grief, poverty, and classism. So if any of that if you don't want to hear any of that or the possibility of that coming up, like, no worries. So what's your relationship with North and South? And have you read it before, or is this your first time? And also give your star rating. Let's just get 3 of my questions right now.
Yeah.
Gotta figure that out. Hold on, Cara, go first.
Okay. So, this is my second time reading it. Also, this is why I never tab things, because look at this nonsense. Like, I have too many thoughts. Yeah, I read it for the first time last year, and I really enjoyed it. I gave it the same rating both times, which is 4 stars. But saying that, it was still one of my favorite books I read. Because, like, there are reasons I feel like I can't give it the full 5 stars, but emotionally, this book lives in my heart. And before that, I had watched the miniseries several times, but it had been a long time. And North and South was kind of one of those classics that I, like, at some point planned to get to, and I just hadn't. And then I started hearing from several friends of mine. Hannah, I remember you were one of the people who was like, you're going to love Margaret. Like, you should read this book. And then I did, and I did. I love Margaret. I love this book. So I really enjoyed rereading this. I really enjoyed the miniseries, but I think that there are things about the book that I love even more.
Respect.
Love that.
I have also seen the miniseries before reading it. I actually watched it with Mary Margaret, if you're still here, Mary Margaret, fairly recently, a couple of months ago. I want to say it was like in the winter. I don't even know. And loved it. And it was interesting because the only thing I've ever heard when people recommend this book is like, for fans of Pride and Prejudice. And I'm like, but how similar can it be? And it's like, oh, actually, you know what? Checks out. There's differences, but it's a pretty good comparison.
Yeah.
And yeah, so this is my first time reading it. And it obviously took me forever, but I really liked reading it. And my rating ended up being 4.6 stars. So
Yeah.
pretty solid.
I think the funniest review for this one I've ever seen was one sentence, and somebody's like, it's Pride and Prejudice for socialists. And I'm like,
But
I
it is
feel
my
called
second
out.
Elizabeth
Yeah. What, Julia?
But it is my second Elizabeth Gaskell book, but this is my first time reading this one. So yeah.
What was the other one you read?
Wives and Daughters.
Oh,
how
I
was
need to
it?
read that one.
I like that one, but it's unfinished.
Yeah.
She didn't
Oh, I
finish
didn't
it.
know
She
that.
died. And so I was very excited that the characters I wanted to be together were getting together. And then the audiobook was like, and then she died and she didn't get to finish the book. And I was like, but the wedding? I thought the wedding was coming. The wedding.
Yeah. Mary Margaret actually told me that this is one of the few times she recommends watching the miniseries before reading the book so that you kind of know where things are going to end up so you don't feel so like unfulfilled when reading it. So
Although honestly, there's like a couple things. I mean, maybe I'm misremembering, but I don't think happened in the book that I like missed from the miniseries personally. I'm sure we can get into that later.
Ooh.
Yeah.
And as for me, this is, first of all, I want to hold up my copy because I think it's so cute.
Woo!
yeah.
Isn't it nice?
That's gorgeous.
So this is my first time reading North and South, or anything by Elizabeth Gaskell. So I really had no idea what it was going in, except when I saw the cover, I'm like, industry.
Look at those smokestacks.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, for like the longest time, I thought it was about the Civil War. And then I heard, like, for some reason, I read that Elizabeth Gaskell was British, and I was like, oh, she must have had a wild time researching the Civil War. I saw it came out in the 1850s, and it never clicked until like the last couple of years.
Okay, but there is a miniseries about the Civil War that's called North and South.
Yes.
So
Yeah,
it checks out.
when I was like doing research on the book, I typed in North and South, and I clicked on it, and there were just two men on the cover, and I was like, who?
Yeah, I don't know who that is.
But I really, really liked it. I loved Margaret Hale. I think she is a fantastic lead, and I didn't expect to like love her as much as I did. And John Thornton, I was also surprised how much I liked him.
I would marry that man.
I know.
We love a simp. And this is one of the things that rings true every live show.
I know.
I did not expect to love him as much. I was like, oh, he's a businessman. I don't have time for entrepreneurs. How many men put that on their like Tinder bio? I don't have time for this. Ugh. And then like, I don't know, I really fell in love with him. And I was like, damn it.
It got me.
Yeah.
But I would give it a solid like 4 out of 5 stars. I want to read it again physically because I listened to the audiobook for this go round. I want to read it physically because I feel like my rating will probably go up too once I spend like a lot more time with the book.
Mm-hmm.
But I loved it. Very excellent piece of Victorian literature, and it was like just what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question is why, I don't know if this question makes any sense actually.
Cool.
I wrote it during my risotto leftovers. Like state of mind. So we'll see. Why Beyond the Geographical? Do you think the book is titled North and South? And I think what I'm trying, I don't know if that makes any sense or okay.
I
cool.
follow.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, if you don't mind me going first,
Please.
I feel like obviously we have those constant comparisons of like the industry and the way of life in the North, and then like the more pastoral, like laid back, more genteel is not the word I'm looking for, but like the way society is in the South and North are so different. But it especially parallels Margaret and Mr. Thornton as they initially meet, and the prejudices that they have against one another initially are like very similar to where those two geographic locations feel about each other. Is that making sense?
Yeah.
So I think it's just a nice parallel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree with everything Julia said. I think you really covered it. I also think that, I don't know if this is exactly answering the question, but something else the title I think is an interesting I don't know, signal for is that like a lot of the book is about these differences, but kind of what makes the story work is when they combine them, like when like Margaret and John start like understanding the good and the bad about each other's perspectives, and kind of where things end up, like where John's like manufacturing business ends up is kind of like blending like the values that he grew up with and then like some of the things that Margaret has said, which I love. Love cooperation.
There's like a few lines in the book specifically where like a character will say in text like, oh, north and south, blah, 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 blah. And every time they did it, I went, oh, like, it's like, you get the theme too. Yay. I love that. I love that.
Yeah. For me, I just really love that it sets up this like dichotomy, and something that I think the book does really well, because when I first picked it up, I thought it was going to be like, oh, the South and the country are going to be seen as like the ideal and like perfect, or not perfect, but as close to perfect as you can get compared to like the industriousness of the North. And what I do like though is that it seemed like instead of having the two clash, there was a lot of clash, but there was a lot of like pros and cons to each one. Like, you know, fresh air, you're not dying of cotton in your lungs. And you know, it just seems a lot slower. There isn't this drive to constantly be making money, but the sort of takeaway is that it's harder to sort of build yourself up. And that like a lot of the labor that most people are doing is like rough on your body too. And you know, in the North you have like the smog and the fact that like you have these people who rise to wealth but almost instantly forget where they came from and are sort of like screwing over the people who work for them. So I just really love that there were both parallels drawn between them, and also, you know, neither side is perfect. I don't know where I was going with that.
No, I agree.
Yeah. I love this book.
I know.
So we can talk further about the difference between Helston and Milton. Even though I did say, like, I think Elizabeth Gaskell does a really good job of sort of showing the pros and cons of either one. Is there one setting that you prefer better than the other?
That's a good question. I think,
and we can also talk about the differences and similarities.
I think like in terms of what I would prefer as like a lifestyle, I think Helston would be better. Like I don't like huge cities and everything, but in terms of the story, the scenes that I liked were all in Milton. So like I don't know, I'm kind of split. Like and some of the descriptions of Helston were beautiful, and I really like what it represented for Margaret, and I think it was a really well written scene, but like all the good stuff happened at Milton. You know?
Yeah, I definitely appreciate the Milton scenes for giving us John Thornton. Hello, like that's the content we're here for, baby. However, I really like, especially later in the book, like how how do you say that? Contemplative.
Contemplative.
Thank you. I was like, there's so many syllables, make them make sense. Margaret is like when she returns to her former home, and like not so much like what she does there, but just like her thoughts as she's seeing all these changes. Like I really liked that for what it was.
Yeah, there was something really nice about the whole like she went out, she saw the city, now she's coming back to her hometown, and like things have changed, but they also haven't, and she's changed a lot too than from when she left.
And that part about how like afterwards she was really glad that she went, and she's like, I could never do that again. I'm like, I feel you. I just feel like Margaret was incredibly relatable. So sorry, Taylor, I didn't mean to cut you.
No, I mean that was really good. I was just going to say, like, so I am a city girl, but I have asthma, so I would probably pick Helston. Every scene with like
is that your blurb for North and South? I'm a city girl, but I have asthma.
Oh my gosh.
Every time I was like, yeah, I mean the country sounds great, but there are so many bugs. But every time Bessie got a chapter, I was like, oh no about that.
Bessie's part was rough.
it was really rough. And the like description of all of the smog, which I'm sure was much worse back then.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing too. The cities were much dirtier too.
Yeah.
But I agree with you in that all of the interesting scenes, or most of the interesting scenes, happen in Milton. And it's also where like most of my favorite characters are from.
Yeah.
And so speaking of Bessie, there's a lot of death in this book. Why do you think Gaskell included so many deaths, or the theme of death and dying in this book? Or do you think it's just a Victorian thing?
Okay, fair point there. Yeah, could just be that. I don't know. That's a really interesting question, because I mean, obviously I was noticing like, oh, there's another character gone, there's another character, but I wasn't directly, other than maybe like what's his name, Bouchard, like I thought about how his death implicated further things in the plot, but for everyone else, I mean, sadly it's like character development for Margaret, or like helping move her plot in a different direction. But I don't know thematically if there's a greater purpose. I don't know.
I feel like for Margaret, like it was really, even though like poor Margaret went through so much, like thank God she had John, because she lost literally every other person in her life who was important to her.
Yeah.
But like one thing that I think it shows for Margaret is that like she's talked about like how she's always been afraid that she's not actually strong or brave. And I feel like one of the things that all of this loss does for her is show that, not that she should have to go through it, but it shows that she can make it through. Like I just like really admire the way she's able to deal with so much suffering and like still think about other people as well. Yeah. So I feel like all the loss in the book really, kind of like you were saying, Julia, I think it like really shows off Margaret's character better. And I feel like it also goes along with some of the book's themes about like what is a good life, and you know, like doing the best you can with the time you have. And I don't know, there's a lot about grief in this book. Like,
yeah, I like kept forgetting it took place over the course of like what, a year and a half?
I think like 3 years by the end of it, but it's still like, but like all of the deaths I think happened within like 1 year or so, 1 or 2 years. So yeah,
I think she was in Milton for like 18 months, they said.
Yeah, and like
yeah. And I mean, at least 2 of the deaths are directly caused by like the city and industry itself. So Bessie has I looked up the name of it. It starts with like a B.
Is it bronchitis?
No,
because that's like something else. That's not from that you get from like fibers.
Yeah, it's like you're working in like a cotton mill or a textile mill or factory, and you're breathing in all of the cotton, which is, it's a rough way to go. And I loved Bessie. And her and Margaret's friendship was just
so sweet.
Yeah. Let's see. Bessie. Yeah. I'll figure it out in a second. I don't want to hold on the live show while I'm trying to do research. I should have written it down.
Well, medical names are always a doozy, so I'm sure it's like a weird word.
But at least 2 of those deaths were caused by industry. Side note, Mr. Hale like got on my like shit list like early on in the book. And so when he was like, when Margaret's mom was dying, he was like, I can't help but feel like I caused this. And I'm like, technically you didn't, but you also really did.
It didn't help.
I was so frustrated with him. Like, I understand his feeling of like moral obligation, but he could have handled everything in like literally any other way. Would have been better.
He could have given them more than 2 weeks notice.
And like letting Margaret be the one to tell her mom instead of him talking to his wife and involving her. And
like at one point, isn't it like Mr. Hale gives Margaret a look like, you have to tell her tonight. And I'm like, you could tell her.
He's like, okay, bye, I'm going for a walk. Like, Yeah.
Oh, I couldn't stand it. And he was like so like blissfully ignorant about his wife's like failing health. I'm like, at this point you're trying. You're trying to be
exactly, Hannah. Like, it's based on Manchester, so like the worst place to take her. And
yeah. He also probably didn't even have to leave the village, or did he give a reason why he had to leave Helston?
To like make way for the new like vicar or something.
Yeah.
And, like I understand his moral thing that he, like, I'm not like blaming him for acting on that. I just think the way he handled everything was awful.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking, like, are there no other homes in Helston that he could live in?
I guess it would be like too painful for him. And it's I had issues with him. Every time, like you said, Taylor, every time like he or somebody else would be like, I wonder if the poor air made her sick. And I'm like, yeah, no. I feel responsible. You should. You should.
Yeah, like, not to be like rude, but also like, you didn't help. Okay, I found the name of what Bessie has. Bisonosis.
Oh,
wow.
I'll type the name in the chat because I probably did not pronounce that correctly. And now there's just this comment in the chat.
It sounds even like horrible.
Yeah.
I will not be looking that up, but thank you, Taylor.
We'll not be doing any further research. No thanks.
So thank you for doing that for us.
You're welcome. So I wanted to talk about the characters before we move on to other questions. And there were really two that I wanted to discuss, and that's Margaret and John. But obviously, if there are any other characters you want to bring up, feel free. But why don't we start with Margaret, our protagonist? So what did you think about her?
I love her with my whole heart. I think I talked about this last time I read this book, but like I am ready to fight people in the comments who were like, Margaret is so spineless. Does she ever do anything? Like, does she ever grow a backbone? And I'm like, excuse you. All of her interactions with her love interest are her arguing with him, and he loves it, and we love it. And like, what's wrong with you? I honestly think like people just, they don't go into classic novels with the right expectation of like what a strong female character is, but that's neither here nor there.
They're expecting this to be stalking Jack the Ripper, and I'm like, calm down, like, no.
Yeah, but like I love Margaret. I admire her strength and her compassion, and like she's so relatable. Like there are so many times where I marked something that was like, I don't know, even though we obviously read a lot of classics, there are still books where I'm like, I am surprised at how personally I connect to things, or like, I just think that's really cool that it's like 200 plus years old. And I'm like, same girl. Like when she's talking about like what a relief it is when her father goes to visit Mr. Bell and she can be happy, she can be unhappy if she wants to. And like how it is exhausting, not only having to go through all of this, but to pretend she's fine. And everybody acts like, oh, Margaret's fine. She's like not suffering at all. And I'm like, she's like miserable, but she has to pretend like she's not.
And it kills me even more because that's like, again, another failing of her father. It's like she has to pretend to be the strong one to help her dad get by. It's like, this is her parent. He should be helping her.
Yeah.
Like you guys should be helping each other get through this. And instead she's like taking all the responsibility. And and I really love, this is one of the things that I love more about the book than the miniseries is like Margaret. Like I don't dislike her in the miniseries, but I feel like we get so many more parts in the book where like she is just like so smart and capable, and like she obviously has her prejudices that she has to outgrow in the course of the book. But like all of those discussions that she has with John, which I love how much time they spend together. I feel like that doesn't happen in a lot of classics, but like all of her conversations with John, I feel like she comes off so much, I don't know, so much more informed in the book. Like in this mini series, I always kind of feel like there's this tone of like, oh, you silly provincial girl, you know? And it's like in the book, it's like, yes, she does have ideals, but she defends them really intelligently. And like John acknowledges that. And like, I don't know, their conversations are so smart. So I don't know where I was going with that. I just love Margaret Hale. That's the bottom line, is I love this woman.
Yes.
Go ahead, Julia.
No, I'm just going to give the one thing about Margaret that bothers me, because I also love Margaret Hale. She drove me bananas with how upset she was about telling the lie. I was like, you could not be more justified in that lie. And she's like, I've sinned. I have to confess this. And I'm like, you're literally protecting your brother's life. Stop being sad about it. Like that.
I agree. That was like,
let go of way sooner.
That was the one thing about her that I like could not stand is I'm like, Margaret, you did the right thing. Like it made me think about how like a while ago, I remember one of my professors telling us that like, I think it's the Jesuits who like their definition, like what they call a lie, or like a lie is only wrong if the person you tell it to is entitled to the truth. Which is like a great, I think, baseline, because that gets rid of like issues where it's like, oh, if you're helping your friend hide from their abusive ex, like don't tell her where she is. Like that's stupid. So anyway, that part really bothered me as well. So I'm like, Margaret, no, you did the ethical thing. Like, and she's like, I will never be cleansed from this. I shall never tell a lie as long as I live. And I'm like,
my falsehood.
She's like, I should have trusted to truth. And I'm like, no, you should not.
You really should not.
You've seen what happened to everybody else. Like protecting your brother is the right thing to do.
Yeah. And like, I get where Elizabeth Gaskell is going with it, because Margaret is such a like moral center of the book, but there's like being like the moral center of a book, and then there's being like obsessed with something that like doesn't even matter in the grand scheme of things, because her brother was out of the country by the time she like told the lie. So he wouldn't have, like, the cops wouldn't have been able to catch up with him. So
and she's like, I should have trusted that he would have been safe. And I'm like, no.
No guarantee. You got his letter 2 days later. Hello.
You didn't know that. And like everybody else, like Mr. Bell, and I don't remember if John finds out the whole story on page, but it's like everybody that she's told this to has been like, you did the right thing. And she's like, I am sullied forever.
Mr. Bell told her like 7 times. He's like, you did the right thing. And she's like,
no.
I'll never forgive myself.
I wish there would have been a little more pushback of like, sometimes, like, I don't know, sometimes you break a rule to do something good. Like, she even, like, that's how she said it, what she said about Frederick, is that, like, I would rather him be a good man, like, a good person, than good at following orders. It's like, do you not see that you did the same thing? It's like, you broke a rule for the right reason.
Wow.
So in short, Julia, I agree with you. That was the thing that bugged me about her.
And it, like, I don't know, it took up time in the book that I wanted for more, like,
more John.
Yearning.
But it was very interesting, like, for their relationship, because like that was weirdly in her twisted little mind. I love you, Margaret, but what's going on, girl? Where she was finally like appreciating him, because she's like, good, he scorns me for lying, as he should. It's not okay, sure.
I mean, like, to be honest, the entire Frederick plot line, I'm like, we could have cut this.
I love Frederick, though.
Oh, I don't love Frederick. I find him kind of boring, but I love, like, the ethical discussions of him, but, like, the extended, like, chunk of the book where nothing is happening except Frederick, I was like, I'm bored. Can we get back to the yearning? Like,
I like Frederick.
I do like how Frederick ties, or, like, his storyline ties into everything else in terms of, like, you know, like, rejecting authority when, like, you can't just blindly trust authority, because, like, sometimes they're human, they do bad things, and
which like in the 1800s, like, bold move, Elizabeth, I like it.
Well, we also have like Mr. Thornton basically just telling the officer, like, just let this one go, don't worry.
I know,
So it's a little sketchy in some parts, but
the whole magistrate system is like, you seem like a nice person. I bet you could solve a murder. Which I guess is basically the jury system. But anyway, sorry, Taylor, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, like, and I do like that Margaret does get, like, a nice little sister-in-law because of Frederick.
Even though she has to be dead to them because she's Catholic.
Everyone was like, oh, she's Catholic? That's the worst thing you could possibly be. As, like, this happened differently, or, like, at different times, but, like, while half of Milton was, like, on strike, and, like, workers weren't being paid fairly.
Margaret seems to come around a little bit by the end, but, like, Dixon is like, I'm gonna go visit her. Oh wait, she's Catholic, isn't she? And then Margaret is like, yes. She's like, I will not even step foot in that country. Like, the papists will swarm me. Like,
yeah, and she was like, I won't be converted. And I was like, then don't.
I know, it's like, it's not like you breathe the air and they turn you into a Roman Catholic. It was wild. I'm like, I get this is a Victorian classic, but like everyone calmed down.
Yeah.
I do love like English literature that like makes up these wild stories about Catholics. Like, I know historically Catholics do not have the best reputation. I say that as a Catholic. But like, I don't know. I think of like The Monk, where a Catholic priest saw one boob and immediately sold his soul to Satan.
Must have been quite a boob. Wow.
Yeah. I know. Like the fact that one of the Gothic tropes is just like Catholics, woo! Like it's not even like murder or anything. It's like just being around.
And not even like the things Catholics were actually doing at the time, like burning people or something.
Indulgences, yeah. Also, yeah.
Yeah. Thank goodness nothing as drastic as seeing a boob and then immediately turning to Satan and sleeping with a witch. The Monk is like great. I love it. Just the 0 to 1,000.
Jeez.
But where was I going with this? Oh, sorry. Once you get me started on The Monk,
tunnel vision.
Yeah. It is surprising what you said, Cara, about like Margaret being seen as like sort of like spineless, because like one of the big turning points in her relationship with John is when she like yells at him because there's a Union like mob down below, and she's like, you're their boss, like you should at least face them like a man instead of calling the cops. And then he goes down and she's like, oh wait, the mob's angry. And then goes down and throws herself between him and the mob and takes a rock for him.
Yeah. Also, I'm sure we're gonna get to this scene, but can I just say, like, I love that this whole thing happens, and like John's like, so we're engaged because we had a moment, and she's like, absolutely not. I would do this for literally everyone. You're disgusting. Get away from me.
You're just the man they happen to be pointing their clogs at, okay? I don't like you.
Like, one of the many things I love about John is he has absolutely no chill. Like, especially with Margaret, he is all in. Like, he's not great at cues. Because, like, she never like gave him any encouragement, which not that, like, if she had, that she would be obligated or anything. But, like, their scenes are very much, like, we can see that he is falling in love with her. And she's just like, you're so annoying. Oh my God, I'm going to tell you how you're wrong. And they have this, like, embrace. And he's like, so when is the wedding? Like, I love you. Please marry me now. And she's, oh my God. Like, just because it's usually, I feel like in these classics, like, the stereotype is that like the women like misinterpret things and they assume the man is in love with them, and it's like John does that in this one, and poor guy.
He's such a simp for Margaret. I love
it. He is. Like, the number of times that he's like, she's dead to me. I'm never going to think about her again. And he just, like, sees her and he's like, oh, God. Like,
sometimes he doesn't even see her. He just thinks a couple seconds more, and then he goes, but I could never actually hate her.
Yeah. This made me realize one of my favorite things about, like, men in classics is when they're like, I will quietly love you forever and I will continue doing nice things for you and never ever pressure you about it. And I'm like,
it's my favorite thing.
I love this man. Like, John and Mr. Darcy, like, there's a lot of similarities between them, including the disastrous first proposal.
Oh, oof.
Just misreading every single sign.
Every cue. Every cue.
That isn't
At
even
least
like,
we know John
obvious.
Likes her parents, okay? Like,
yeah.
At least won't insult her family.
John's wasn't as bad as Mr. Darcy being like, I literally cannot stand anyone you're related to. Let's get married. Like,
everyone you're associated with is an embarrassment. Do you accept?
Yeah. I can't believe this didn't work. Like,
now I want to make like a Twitter account that's like dudes who are down bad, and it's just literary dudes who
yes.
It's just Mr. Darcy and Jack Thornton just over and over and over again. Maybe Captain Wentworth thrown in there for flavor. But yeah, I mean, we can talk about that scene where Margaret does throw herself in front of him or between him and the mob, which, I mean, that was when I was sold immediately on John and Margaret's relationship, because it was such, and also on Margaret. Like, I already really liked her, but that was such like a brave thing to do.
Yeah.
And I did relate to her, because when I was reading the book at first, I was like, John, go down there and face your workers.
Yeah.
Like, do it. And then he went down, and I was like, wait. It got really riled up down there.
Yeah. Yeah. And just like, I love that this is another example of like Margaret feeling like she's like, her biggest fear has always been that she would be a coward when it mattered. And like her getting to see that she's not, I just like love her.
Yeah. Oh, and sorry, just bringing that parallel back where like she puts herself in front of him, and I think she like puts her head on his shoulder or something, and then at the end when he's proposing to her and she does the same thing, but this time she's just so struck with love. And
Julia, are you glad you read those last 2 chapters before you started?
Yes, but I still really love the train station scene, Cara.
Yeah,
I can't erase
it. I like it. I'm never going to be mad about seeing Richard Armitage's handsome face, but it's just so weird to me, like, in a random train station, and they don't talk at all. I like their dialogue.
The train station is symbolic because
I understand
it's between north and south.
I know, but I just prefer the book. And I think like even more, if we're just talking about John and Margaret scenes, I'm sorry, Taylor, I've gotten us so off track from your question.
No, keep going.
Like one of my other favorite scenes is the one like right before the end where like he's talking about how like after losing his business, one of the things he's going to really miss is like getting to like talk with the workers and like, you know, learn from each other and everything. And he knows Margaret has been listening. And so he comes over to her and he's like telling her about how like Higgins and all of the other workers signed a note saying they want to come work for him if he ever gets his business back. And he's like, that's good, right? And she's like, yeah, that's good. And like they have like a moment and they just like stand there looking at each other and then they go away. And it's
very sweet.
I love it. He's like, I knew that would make you happy. And then they just like gaze at each other for a while and then part ways. I love them.
And I gotta say, like, I haven't seen the North and South TV show, but their ending I just thought was so cute and kind of cheesy. Like, I don't know. Hold on, let me pull it up. It's like, oh, well, my aunt's going to be so disappointed. And he's like, well, my mom's going to be disappointed.
Yeah.
Which I honestly think is unfair. Like, I love his mom. She's awful and I love her. Okay.
She's one of those people that I think like once she likes you, she will die for you, but it takes her a while to get there. So I think once she comes around to Margaret, she would defend her to the death. Like,
yeah.
And
she's even said that she
admires her was her not liking her son. So when she knows she loves her son, all should be well.
I thought that turnaround was hilarious when she was like, she's like, you better not be trying to marry her. And he's like, oh no, she wouldn't take me. And she's like, that bitch wouldn't take you.
I love it. That is such like a mom move too.
Yes.
Yeah. I think that sold me on her a bit. She was like super brash and like rude to like Margaret and stuff, but I was also like, I do love how much she loves her son. And how like I mean, I do feel bad for Fanny because the mom clearly doesn't like Fanny as much as she likes John, but I do like how she's very like stern and serious with John, and he's like that back at her, and that's how she like shows love. And John like understands that too, so it's not even like a my mom hates me. It's like, no, this is how she shows love, and she loves me very much.
Yes. I'm glad you mentioned Fanny because I always feel a little bad for her too. It's like, she's annoying, but like, it's, I don't know. I feel like we're supposed to hate her on sight. And I'm like, I don't hate her. She's just kind of like annoying. I don't know. Like when everyone's like making fun of her because she passed out during the riot, I'm like, I think I would be Fanny in this instance. I'd be like unconscious on the sofa while somebody else is like being a hero. I'm like Margaret. That's what I'm afraid of.
That was the exact impression I had. I think even more so in the miniseries, although the first scene she's in is like very true to book, where it's like they're coming over and, you know, meeting the Hales and everything. And she's just like, oh, you don't have a piano? You don't play the piano? Like she's like, she comes off very like frivolous. But the thing is, like, she doesn't do anything that makes me go like, oh, that bitch. Like, I'm just like, she's just like a silly girl and I don't have anything against her. Like,
Yeah.
like, this is just how she was raised. She's just like, yeah, I'm going to be lazy.
Exactly.
Here's the things. So
exactly. That's how I feel about like Edith and Fanny are both kind of written about like we're supposed to be like so frivolous, like we hate them. And it's like they're doing what they were raised to do. Like to in like gowns and parties and who they're gonna marry and all of this. Like that's like literally what they're told their job is, and then we like judge them for it. I don't like that.
And there were multiple lines like about that too. Sorry, Taylor.
No, go for it.
That were like, oh, but that's just frivolous woman's concerns. And I was just like, Elizabeth, I think we're better than this. Like, why is this line in here?
Yeah. Because like on one hand, like I do, because like Margaret thought that a couple of times, like, oh, the women are talking about dresses and parties, and I want to go over here with the men and talk about like industry and unions and stuff.
Margaret's not like other Victorian girls. Like,
one, she's alive. Two,
yeah. I didn't mean to interrupt you again. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. That was a good one. Why did I? No.
I don't know.
Oh, yes. And like on one hand I sympathize because like if talking about dresses and parties is all you're expected to talk about, like, and you're not interested in that, like that is like that can get very boring. And if you want to talk about what's more traditionally a masculine subject, I mean, you know, it's not, but you know, but also like talking about dresses and parties is fun. And I wish that it had been like stated in a way that wasn't disparaging really to the other women with what they were talking about, and more just like, well, this is what Margaret likes. And it's not because it's like a woman's conversation and stuff like that. It just got a little too disparaging.
Yeah, and especially because like we see that Margaret also enjoys things like dressing up sometimes, and like one of the things that I wish we had seen in the miniseries is how playful she can be and how funny she can be. Like when she's like modeling her dresses for her mom, and she's like backing out like her mom is the queen, and then her mom's like, "This is serious business. Like, put on the next dress, Margaret." And so it's like we see that Margaret also can enjoy stuff like that. So I also wish that there was more of like a Margaret's not interested in like maybe they've been talking about the same party for like the entire dinner party, and then she'd be like bored or whatever, versus kind of it coming off as disparaging of like their interests, you know.
Right.
I agree.
Yeah. We can talk about John Thornton a little bit. Would we like to? I feel like we've talked about him a lot.
I just love him.
Also love him.
One of the pages that I marked
is earnest. That's my word.
Yes, that's right. He's earnest. Yeah. There's like a whole page that I just like tabbed the top of the page because I'm like, I want to save this entire like section of the book where the narrator is basically like, John is a big softie inside, and yet he hates when people find out about it. Like the thing, when he starts that like not exactly a soup kitchen, but like dining room, you know, and he's talking about like, well, it saves money to buy in wholesale, and Mr. Bell tries to give him a donation. He's like, no, I'm not running a charity. And it's like, okay, but you did start this because you saw 2 children weren't getting enough dinner. Like, you're a good person and you need to accept it, John. Like, I love him.
Yeah, I mean, we can also talk about how he changed from like the beginning of the book to this like very serious industrialist. And like at the end where he like actually respects his workers and realizes like, oh, if I respect the people who are working for me, they'll respect me in return. And they'll do things for me like stay late and make sure something gets done. And
like I think one of his and Margaret's first big conversations is when he like tells them about his backstory and how that's made him very much one of those people who's like, oh, if you're not successful, it's because you're lazy. Because if I can do it, you know, anyone can do it. And Margaret is like, that's stupid. Here's why. And like they have this great like argument about it. And I love how, even though like the book doesn't explicitly say, and then John changed his mind, it's like you see that with what happens with him and like losing all his money and everything, it's like the book contradicts that, I think, really strongly, because he has to realize now that like working hard does not mean you're always going to be successful, and I love that. I also love that Margaret is the one to save him with her money instead of
Yeah.
like him, you know, like I feel like that's usually a male character thing. So I love that like Margaret swoops in with her investments and
Yeah.
just love that. So
Yes.
Yeah.
Agreed. I don't know. So correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't think this was in the book. This is one of the things I alluded to earlier. But I think the scene really early in the miniseries, it might be, I don't know if it's the first time Margaret sees Mr. Thornton, or maybe it's like after she meets him once and then sees him again. But there's like this scene where he's like literally beating up one of his employees, and he's like, "Get out of here! You can't work here!" And she's like, "Take a chill pill, stop abusing this man." And he's like, what was he even doing? Like smoking a pipe. And he's like, he could light this whole place up and kill everyone inside smoking in a freaking cotton mill.
yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm kicking him out. And I just feel like that scene is so vivid in my mind, because like in that moment, I like saw what Margaret saw, where I was like, whoa, no. And then when I heard with like, there's like the caring side of him that we haven't fully explored yet, that I'm like excited to know. And I just really think that scene is so interesting. But it's not in the book, right?
No, it's not. And I think like, because I also remember that scene, and I like how it shows kind of like where both of them are coming from. But that's also one of the things that like, I don't like how the overall tone of the miniseries is like, Margaret thinks she knows best, but John has to explain things to her. Like, I feel like that happens a lot more in the miniseries, whereas in the book, it's much more equal. Like, we see Margaret winning arguments more in the book, and that's something I value. But I do really like that scene as well. I think that's a good like setup for like how the ethical questions are not always so like cut and dried and everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I mean, we could also talk about how like John also manages to sway Margaret a little bit. Yeah. And it could be my bias, because I was very much like, John, you're an industrialist, you're a capitalist, I don't want to hear it. Yeah. So that might be my own bias, but I do think he at least tells Margaret, like, I mean, things in the country aren't all perfect. It's not perfect either. Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, it's hard for me to parse it, because like I clearly lean more towards one side.
Yeah.
But I do like that he, like, through his conversations, like Margaret was also able to like learn from him a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was interesting too, their conversations, that because it's like, us as a modern reader, like this, I don't think is like our priority, but it was interesting to me the way her views on class changed, where like when she first met him, she's like, oh, businessman, a loser. And then she's like, oh wait, I respect what he does. And he like has really built himself up. Okay. Like he's like at my level, you know, like she really looked down on him at first. And that's like, I don't know.
This like North and South, when I read it last year, was one of the things that I'm like, oh, apparently I really like a Victorian working man. Like a Victorian self-made man is a trope that I just enjoy. Like,
yeah. And I mean, it just adds this really nice quality to him, because like obviously we know, and like the book sort of like lets you know that like just because you work hard doesn't mean you're going to make it. So it's not easy to say like, oh, just work up and pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Like it's not as simple as that. But it is nice seeing John sort of like work hard and make himself into this like business owner and something, because you know it's like hard work, and obviously there are elements of privilege there and so on, but like that is still a good quality, even though like the myth of pulling yourself up by your bootstraps is
agreed.
Let's see. So we've talked about Margaret and John's relationship. I feel like we covered a lot of my questions. So I have, what do you think of Margaret and John's relationship? Is it believable? I feel like we all know what we think.
A resounding yes.
Yeah. Yes. Unless either of you have anything else to say on it, or
I don't think I do.
Okay.
We love him.
We love him, yeah.
So what do you think Elizabeth Gaskell herself thinks about the Industrial Revolution and her views on like labor and industry and unions are? Like, where do you think she lies in this?
I think she was like so ahead of her time. Like, even, I mean, some of the conversations she's having, I'm like, we're struggling to have these conversations now. So
Yeah.
like I just really love that she kind of, she's like, I'm gonna tell you this great love story and also about the evils of capitalism. Let's go. Like,
It's like that Looney Tunes box meme where
it's the like sneaking you in and then trapping you with feminism. Yeah. My favorite meme you've done, Julia.
We're making a new version for sure.
Yes, please. But yeah, like I just think her discussion of this is so incredibly nuanced and thoughtful, and like the fact that I'd have to check the publication year again, but like I think that at the time she was writing this, like the Industrial Revolution was still like on the upward swing. Like it was still like building, and like like not only was it currently happening, but like nobody really had started to think about some of the negative aspects, and she did. And she like talked about like what the cost was for like the workers, you know, who are involved. And she does like humanize some of the mill owners, obviously, because John has a great character arc. But I really like that so much of this book is about like with poor Bessie and John Boucher, like the way it talks about how like not everyone has the same set of choices, you know. And I like how much was about unions, and the way that like it's interesting seeing Margaret be like so put off by the way the unions kind of like force people to join them. But then like Higgins is like, you don't understand that this is the only power we have, and this is the only way we can make a difference, maybe, is if everybody's involved in it. So I don't know. I feel like I'm just rambling like a list of things about this book now, so I should just stop. But I think she did a great job. I think it was really thoughtful. I'm just like really impressed with like how compassionate she was about this stuff when she was writing at a time when everybody would have been like, yeah, machines, industrialization, smoke. Like,
I'm gonna lick this cotton gin.
Yeah.
That's my impression.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree though. I think she was incredibly like progressive in the way she was writing about it, because it was, like you said, like just very nuanced. It wasn't one-sided. It was seeing the pros and cons of industry and like humanizing both, you know, factory owners and factory workers. And I loved like, I mean, there were just several moments where, you know, not even always the same character. Like someone would say something like, I wish you guys could just talk it out. Like, you know, master to worker, like, let's talk it out like humans and figure out what's best for everybody. Like that's such, you would think that would be like the logical thing, but everyone's like, hey, have you tried this? So yeah, I really liked the way she discussed those issues.
Yeah. And even stuff with like the scabs, you know, like when they brought in like the Irish workers and everything. I like how there were some characters who were like, but how can we, like, they're trying to feed their children too, you know? And even though from our perspective, it's like we think they shouldn't have done this. They should have understood that this is going to devalue everybody's wages. But like, how could they say no to having like food, you know, for their family? And like, even when like, Higgins is talking about like, if he could go to the South, he'd take half pay if he had to. And Margaret's like, you were really angry at the Irish for doing that. Like, I really like that.
Yeah. And I also like, because I can tell that Elizabeth Gaskell is pro-union, or at least thinks they're a good idea, but she also shows like, well, humans are also running these unions, and humans are flawed, and not every union is going to be perfect, because they could be run by someone who doesn't have the union's best interests at heart. So I do like that it was like, unions are great when they're run by like well-meaning people. And I don't know, I love how like nuanced this book was. Like, like I said, I went in thinking it was going to be an anti-industry book, and it wasn't that. It was just like, what if we stopped and thought about this?
Concept. What if we like thought something through? Yeah.
What if we put our thinking caps on? And...
I really like at the end when John is talking about how like he and the workers are like collaborating on projects now, and how that makes them feel invested in the success of a project rather than just having it handed down to them from management. And like one of his listeners is like, oh, so do you think this is going to eliminate strikes? And he's like, no. He's like, that'd be great. He's like, well, I don't think it's going to happen, but I think it will. It won't be such a like vicious, like, I don't remember how he said it. He said it a lot better than I did, but he's like, it'll be less like ugly, basically. Yeah. And I think that is really nuanced too, that like, it's not, you're not going to be able to get rid of disagreements, but if you treat each other like people, you're starting from a much better place to agree on things.
Yeah. And I mean, it also, I feel like it ties into what we're seeing now with like the Great Resignation, is that a lot of people are trying to like let employers know, like, if you treat us well, we will do good work for you. But if not, we can go and find work somewhere else. And, you know, it's forcing, I think, a lot of employers to think like, okay, what can we do to get people to stay and churn out good work consistently? Mm-hmm. And it's things like collaboration, getting to see like the CEOs more often and like talk with them and like let them know like, okay, like these are my ideas and know that your voice is valued. And I feel like you see a lot of this in North and South too. And it's just great. Both great and not great how like relevant these conversations are to today.
Yeah. Like, I really wish we'd come farther than this, but
I feel like every other book we read, we go, this is still pertinent, huh?
Yeah. I know.
It's been like 170 years. Yeah. I think we'd be over this by now.
Yeah.
Let's see, what other questions did I have? Because it is 6:08 and I don't want to hold you guys.
I mean, I have something I want to talk about.
Oh, yeah?
So I don't know if anyone, probably other people noticed this, but it could just be Julia brain. So all of my orange tabs, I don't know if you can see how much orange there is about the theme of parents and children, which obviously we have a lot of literal parents and children in this book, but there are multiple instances where other things are alluded to in metaphor of parents and children. And I was like, Lizzie, if I may call you Lizzie, I love what you're doing here. And let's see if I can even just find one, but they were very interesting. That's a literal one. Talk about something else amongst yourselves for a minute. I'm just going to peruse.
Well, I did have one final question, which is what do you think about, or like, what is the significance of Margaret and John's financial situations essentially switching? Because like you said, I do love that, like, it's now Margaret that raises John out of, like, the potential of poverty and, like, helps him. But I wanted to know what you all thought.
Yeah, I feel like it puts them on an even more even playing field. I really like that it's this subversion of, like, the female character often marrying very well, you know? It's like now John's marrying well. And I also like how that plays into what we were talking about before, about this idea of like bootstrapping and like, oh, if you just work hard, you'll always succeed. And like that is not the case. Also, I love that John like refused to do that speculation deal because he's like, even if I succeeded, I would never forgive myself for risking the lives of thousands so that I could have more money that I didn't need. And I'm like, I love him. So I just really liked it. I like that it also kind of gave Margaret the opportunity to be more independent, the way that she'd always kind of wanted to be. Like, there's that great part where she's talking about, I mean, it's once again, it's really sad that it partly happened because she lost everybody in her life. But there's that part that talks about how, like, for the first time, she's like, I can make my own decisions and I feel like I can fight people on them if I need to. And she does. She like stands up to her aunt and Edith, even like, she's like, I know you mean well, but that's not what I want to do. And yeah, I like the way that played out with her getting all the money and like rescuing his mill because he's doing good work for people. And
Yeah. Ah.
I just agree. I don't have anything to add to that. And I did find what I was looking for.
Yes.
So, okay, so I found one that was just like one of the random ones where I was like, oh, and it is, I think this is after Margaret's mom dies, or maybe after her father dies. And there's a part where like Thornton asks Dixon, he's like, hey, how's she doing? How's my girl?
yeah.
And she's like, oh yeah, she bears it much better. Oh no, wait. This is after her mother, because she said, Masters terribly broke down. Miss Hale bears up better than likely. Like, good old Margaret, what a trooper. She's hiding her pain. But it said, in the first place, there was selfishness enough in him to have taken pleasure in the idea that his great love might come in to comfort and console her. Much the same kind of strange, passionate pleasure which comes stinging through a mother's heart when her drooping infant nestles close to her and is dependent upon her for everything. And I was like, that's so funny to like compare that romantically, but also like that's genius. That's like absolutely what he's feeling. But my favorite one was when they're talking about union and stuff. Mr. Hale actually is his one shining moment. Way to go, Mr. Hale. We love him succeeding. This is a long quote, so bear with me. He says, I dare say I am talking in great ignorance, but from the little I know, I should say that the masses were already passing rapidly into the troublesome stage which intervenes between childhood and manhood, in the life of the multitude as well as that of the individual. Now, the error which many parents commit in the treatment of the individual at this time is insisting on the same unreasoning obedience as when all he had to do in the way of duty was to obey the simple laws of come when you're called and do as you're bid. But a wise parent humors the desire for independent action so as to become the friend and advisor when his absolute rule shall cease. If I get wrong in my reasoning, recollect it is you who adopted the analogy. But I was like, to compare the unions to parents and children, I love it here. So I've already shared my favorite quotes.
That's a really good one. And I really do love that comparison. One, because it's just a great thing to say about parenting in general. But two, it really does accurately describe like how paternalistic a lot of industrialists see their workers. But like, okay, you treat them like your kids, but like you expect them to be obedient. And that's not what a good like parent does.
Yeah, I had thought of like the parent analogies mainly in the sense of Margaret and how she kind of has to take care of both of her parents, but I didn't think about like the number of comparisons in the rest of the book. So thank you, Julia.
Yeah, there are multiple. That was
you're like my time has come, guys. Like
there's one about a mother bird. There was one like something else. There's one towards the end, and I was like, another. There's Margaret taking care of her nephew when Edith was like, I can't do it, and she's like, I got this.
Yeah, I actually found that like really charming.
Yeah,
she's like looking after her like nephew who's like snotty and like it's very cute.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's my Julia 2 cents for you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and on that note, did we want to share quotes?
Yeah, I have kind of a bunch. I'm sorry, you guys.
No, that's totally fine. I'm trying to figure out which ones are mine.
Okay, you guys. You know how I was reading up into the live show?
Yes.
My Bookly app has been going through the whole live show, so it thinks I've still been reading for the last hour and 13 minutes. Okay.
Does it like track your reading time or something?
Yeah.
Oh, I've never heard of that.
Okay. I'll plug it after we finish talking about the book. I love Bookly, so we'll come back. Put a pin in that.
One of the ones that I really liked, and I think it was like indicative of one of the big themes of the book, is Margaret the churchwoman, her father the dissenter, Higgins the infidel, knelt down together. It did them no harm. I really love that. Like Elizabeth Gaskell's big on religious freedom, mostly. unless you're a Roman Catholic.
Yeah.
But like I really liked I thought that the themes of like religion and faith and when it's hard or when it's easy to believe, I just really liked the way all of that was done. Like the scenes with Bessie with that just like broke my heart. I mean, everything surrounding Bessie basically broke my heart, but I really like that quote. Very pithy, but also very indicative of, I think, one of the main themes of the book.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have more. Let's see.
Oh, I know a quote I want to share. I gotta find it.
Yeah, I was saying earlier, or I think before we started the live show, like one of the downsides to using audiobooks is that you just don't save quotes. So I'm here on like Goodreads quotes trying to find like the perfect one.
Yeah. Do you guys mind if I keep going, and then if you have one, just interrupt me, okay?
Keep going,
yes, please
do
go.
One I loved is it's like 100 pages in. Papa, I do think Mr. Thornton a very remarkable man, but personally, I don't like him at all. Like, this has really big Elizabeth Bennet energy when she's like, Mother, I believe I can safely promise you never to dance with Mr. Darcy. It's like, okay. I love it.
Let's see. It's 24.
I love this. I don't even know who said this. It's such a short little quote from page 60, but the future must be met, however stern and iron it be. Like, I love that.
Yeah. I don't know if I marked this for a quote or for Margaret. All of my like green tabs are Margaret because it's my favorite color. But that
my
one
Mr. Thornton tabs are green.
Oh,
so that's cute.
When she's talking about, or like the narrator is like how she's looking back at the experiences of the last like year or two, and how if she had been told everything that was going to happen, she'd be like, I cannot survive this. Like, I could not go through this. But because it's all happened, she like got through it day by day. Like, I don't know. There are just like so many of those moments that are just written in a way that is like, I feel this in my soul. Like, I just love when like old books can still, I don't know, hit you. That's like a very like generic thing to say, but you guys know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I love that they can feel so personal, you know? It's like when I get excited because I read a Shakespeare play and there's like a line where I'm like, this is still a mood. Like, good one, Will.
Sorry, I'm looking for my quote and I just remembered that John had like dried flowers from Helston.
Yeah, he sure did. I love him.
And like then when she's like, you're gonna have to give them to me, and he's like, you're gonna have to pay me for them.
Yeah. Okay, flirties. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's like they're clearly kissing. They just don't say that because it's a classic. They're like, they were quiet for a few minutes. Like, that's code.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
I'm gonna mute this and scream.
Yeah. When we were talking about Mrs. Thornton's relationship with her son, I marked the one where she says he's telling her that I think it's during the riot that she can like hide in the room, and she says, I stop here, where you are, there I stay.
Wow. I found this not because I marked it as a quote, but because I marked it with my parenting color, and it just said, I will cry afterwards. So I was like, oh, what's this? Now I understand why I was going to cry. It's when his mom is trying to ask him like how his proposal went. He longed to reply with a jest. The bitterness of his heart could have uttered one, but his mother deserved better of him. He came round behind her so that she could not see his looks, and bending back her gray stony face, he kissed it, murmuring, no one loves me. No one cares for me but you, mother. It's so sad.
He really is down bad.
Yeah. Poor boy.
Okay, there's one. You just reminded me of one that I wanted to find because I very predictably used pink for my favorite like romantic moments with them.
Love that. I was going to have a romance color, but then all my Mr. Thornton quotes ended up being him being romantic, and I was like, well, okay, they're just all his color now.
Yeah. I love that, like, every time they're in the room together, Margaret's like, oh, he didn't look at me. He must not know I was here. And it's like, he sees everything. Like, yeah. He's, like, immediate, like, not in a creepy way, but he's just, like, so aware of her all the time.
That very first scene when she's pouring the tea, and he is noticing the bracelet like slip and then her pushing it back up. I'm like, this man, the attention to detail. I love him. I also love, this is a Frederick quote for my Frederick haters out there. I love when he said, thinking has many a time made me sad, darling, but doing never did in all my life. I was like, oh.
I just found him
a man of action.
A little annoyingly impetuous. Like, and there's those couple parts where like Margaret's thinking like, sometimes he looks really angry and dangerous, but not in a scary way. And I'm like, it's like, there's only like one or two there's only like one or two references to it, but I remember being like, what?
Oh, but there were so many moments where she was like, and we looked into each other's eyes, and I realized he was thinking what I was thinking.
Yeah,
I was like,
no. I do like their relationship. I think part of it was like, I just didn't find how long his plot line dragged out, and like it was kind of all the same thing. It was like, is he gonna get caught? Is he gonna get caught? He almost got caught. He's not caught. Is he gonna get caught? Like. But I do like their like seeing them like rekindle their like sibling relationship was really lovely.
Yeah.
Okay, I found the one I was thinking of. Like, Miss Hale might love another, was indifferent and contemptuous to him, but he would yet do her faithful acts of service of which she should never know.
That's the vibe.
No, I'm looking at quotes here, and I came across the one where John thought that like the rock hit Margaret and he thought that she was dead, and he calls her my Margaret. Oh, my Margaret, no one can tell what you are to me. Dead, cold as you lie there, you are the only woman I ever loved. Oh, Margaret.
Okay, but that moment is ruined by her immediately coming out of her faint and going like, ew, did he just confess his love to me? No, like she was pissed. And I did not like that. I was like, oh no.
And John's just like, ooh.
Yeah. Oh my god. Like I feel so bad for like it's funny, but it's also like so sad that he like grossly misinterprets every interaction they've ever had.
Yeah.
Like
also,
when he's
John,
like, he's like, you saved my life because you're in love with me, right? She's like, there is not a man in that room I would have done more for. Like, ouch! It's like, Margaret, you could have just said no.
Yeah.
Taylor, what were you gonna say?
Oh yeah, why didn't John just see if she was breathing or check her pulse before he was like, let me declare my love to this corpse?
Yeah, do the little like, hello,
yeah,
are you okay? The 911, like, you know, the CPR training where you tap them, are you okay? You should have done that and see if she responded first.
Yeah. Well, and it's interesting too, because like we're told and we see that in general he's much more like emotions stay inside kind of person, but like with Margaret, no, like not even a little bit.
He calls her my Margaret.
I know.
I just like love that he is so emotional. Like, I don't know. I like when men are allowed to express their feelings in healthy ways, and the fact that he cries in this book, it's weird to be like, I love when a man cries, but
I love when a man cries.
I just like it's even though he's very much like stern and gruff and like I'm like, you know, a working man, I make hard choices. He's not like toxic masculinity like at all. Like I love him for that.
I agree with that in every sense. Like even in the non-romantic sense, I love when a man cries. Every Father's Day, I write my little card and I go, I hope my dad cries. Like that's my goal every year.
Yeah.
I just wanted to read the last lines of the book just because I love them so much. So they're just getting together.
Sorry,
how shall I ever tell Aunt Shaw? She whispered after some time of delicious silence.
I'm telling you.
Delicious silence.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a little saucy.
Yeah.
Let me speak to her. Oh no, I owe her. But what will she say? I can guess. Her first exclamation will be, that man. Hush, said Margaret, or I shall try and show you your mother's indignant tones as she says, that woman. And then the book ends.
I love that.
They're so cute.
What a note to end it on. I love it. Yeah.
I like that they joke with each other.
What's that, Taylor?
I like that they joke with each other.
I know.
Yeah. I also, this is one of the rare quotes I marked that does not have to do with my two faves. But I really liked Mr. Bell when he says, I always keep my conscience as tight shut up as a jack-in-the-box. For what it surprises me by its size, so I coax it down again as the fisherman coaxed the genie. Wonderful, say I, to think that you have been concealed so long and in so small a compass that I really did not know of your existence. It cracks me up. Like, he's like a really nice person, but
yeah, it's just a funny line.
Yeah.
Yeah, but unless anyone has anything else they'd like to share or not, we can.
You want me to plug Bookly now? Not sponsored, yes. But
I feel like after I talked about the monk, this wouldn't even have a chance of being sponsored.
True.
Flag for inappropriate content.
Bookly, if somehow you see this, let's collab, let's work. I love your app. I pay for the pro version, okay? I love it. So you like have all your little books that you're currently reading, right? And then when you're reading them, you just do a little reading session. I don't know if you can see. And so it like times you can add your quotes, you can add your thoughts. And then, so the reason it's timing you is because later you can go in and it'll tell you like, oh, here's the rate that you were reading at for that reading session. It'll probably take you this much longer to read it. If you set a reading goal, it'll tell you, oh, read 20 more minutes a day or read, 15 minutes a day.
Oh,
it's like so nice. You can like check your little stats, like the days that you read this book. And it like has, so like, here's all my books that I can go back and check the stats on. I love it. It has like you can set goals for the day, the month, the year, however much you want to read when, in pages or in time read. I can keep going. I love this app.
I think I'm going to download it after this.
Yeah, it has like your annual reading stats and your like reading stats for as long as you've had the app, which is wild to look at if you've ever wanted to see how many, pages or like hours you read in a year. Like,
oh, wow.
Nuts. And it's just highly enjoyable, and you can get a little monthly report. So like I read this much this is April, and it's red because that's less time than I read in the month of March, and like blue is like more, and like
I love that.
What I read the fastest, what I've been reading the slowest, everything I read that month is right there.
You sold me on this.
I love this app.
I like the idea of all the stats. The only reason I think the app wouldn't work for me is sometimes I need to be able to lie to myself about how long I need to read a book. Like, I depend on that. Like, there are some times where it's like, I can finish this at a reasonable hour and then go to bed. And even if that's not true, I have to believe it's true because I need to actually finish the book.
Okay, wait, I got you. Here's your life hack. So when you're on a book, hit that little plus sign instead of continue reading. And then you can put whatever page you started and whatever page you end, but then just lie about how long it took you to read. Just say like 0 minutes. And then it'll never give you an accurate prediction. It'll just give you like how many pages you read that day.
Okay, I will.
I'm just saying.
That.
I love that. I am definitely going to put that down because my coworker and my boyfriend's mom both got me into Ellen Hilderbrand. So I've been reading through her books. So, and they're like so good to like sit down and read like 50 pages of. So yeah, I'm going to use that because I've been trying to read a lot more and those are so good.
So Bookly sponsor Julia. She just sold
something. I love your product, Bookly. Like, I'm not exaggerating. I've been using it for years.
Oh, we have another comment on North and South. And like with every live show that I host, I forget that I can put the comments up on the screen.
You have that power
until the very end. So I'm going to do it for this last one. Although it's not the main story or characters, I thought the friendship between Margaret's dad and Bessie's dad was cute and endearing.
Yeah,
I agree.
I know.
I feel like times I like Mr. Hale.
I feel like I gushed obviously a lot more about like John and Margaret's romance, but the friendships in this book I really loved. Like Bessie and Margaret, and like then after she dies, like Margaret and her dad. Like I really, really loved them. So
And when Mary came by and was like, my sister really wanted something of yours to be buried in, I was like,
okay, do you guys want to hear how this book fooled me again, even though I've read it before?
yes.
So when I first read it, like last year, it had been a while since I'd seen the miniseries. So I remembered like big things that happened, but I didn't remember how they happened. And there's that part where Margaret gets somebody sends a message saying that Bessie wants to see her. And she's like, oh, I'm too tired. Like, oh, and her mom was sick. She's like, I'll go tomorrow. And I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, if she dies with no one there and like you're not there. And then she didn't. So I'm like, oh, okay, that's fine then. And then I did the same thing again this time because I was like, I thought I remembered that she dies when Margaret isn't there, but I must have misremembered. And then she comes in and Dixon is going through her stuff and she's like, what are you doing? And she's like, your friend Bessie just died and she asked to be buried in something of yours. And I'm like, again, Elizabeth?
Oh no.
She fooled me twice. Shame on me.
Yeah.
Ugh.
That got me. Poor Bessie.
Poor Bessie. Like, oh my God. All of her scenes were just like... And when she kept apologizing for being scared of dying, and I'm like, you don't need to! Like,
Yeah. Hello.
Yeah. So good. And on that note, Cara, would you like to introduce the topic of our June book?
I think I actually have my copy somewhere. Maybe.
I need to get my copy.
Mine is upstairs.
Apparently I don't have it because that would help me be prepared. If I can't find it in like a minute, I'll just come back. But you guys continue talking while I look.
Our book is going to be great. It's a nonfiction. Is this our second nonfiction?
Okay. It might be
I did find
an essay. It's an essay, right?
Yes, although it's longer than I think an essay might.
It's like
More
mine's
maybe.
like 100 and something. It's probably the same edition. I don't know why I'm saying mine.
Yeah.
There can't be that many editions of it.
It's not actually super long. It's just like it's not as short as Letter from Birmingham Jail, for example.
Right.
But so our next book is going to be The Nobility and Excellence of Women and the Defects and Vices of Men by Lucrezia Marinella, edited and translated by Anne Dunhill. So yeah, I'm very excited for this. This is a feminist text, and the title is a play on I don't even know who wrote it, but some man philosopher who
stupid man.
Yeah, who was a misogynist, obviously. He wrote one that was basically the reverse. That was like the title was how like this, but with women being awful. And this book marks, or this essay when it was published, marked the first time that an Italian woman argued with a man in print. Because she published this as like a rebuttal. I think that's the word I'm looking for. Like he published it and she was like, no, sir. And she published her own, and I'm really excited about it. It's like considered a like really important like early feminist work because she it was published in 1600. So I think that's really cool. Composed at a furious pace in answer to Giuseppe Pasti's diatribe against about women's alleged defects. So I'm just really excited to read some classic Italian feminism. So
you, Giuseppe.
Yeah. And she wrote like several other like literary like feminist works or something. So
I love it.
Love it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
I'm really excited
Also,
too. There's like several other books in this like series of nonfiction, and there's a couple others where I'm like, ooh, I think I want to read that on my own time because really looking forward to it. So yeah, that's going to be our next book. We kind of ended up just pushing back our schedule a month. So that'll be at the end of June-ish on my channel. Probably will be, I'm guessing it'll be like July 3rd maybe, but we haven't like officially decided that.
June.
Buckle
3rd?
up for fireworks.
No, July 3rd because that's like the first Sunday after the end of June.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
So, I mean, we haven't like decided or anything.
We'll have to discuss that. I might be in California then.
Yeah, Taylor's
okay.
going,
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're fine. So stay tuned about when we're actually
gonna we'll figure that out. Sorry. Oh, and one last fact before we tune out, because I remembered this all of a sudden. Charles Dickens was Elizabeth Gaskell's editor.
Ooh.
What?
He edited North and South.
Oh my God.
Such a fun fact.
That is a fun fact. Oh, yeah, sorry. The book's title, and I can put this in the chat as well. The Nobility and Excellence of Women and the Defects and Vices of Men.
It's a doozy of a title.
Yeah, it's a long one because it's like a It's parodying one he did. So let me put that and the author in the chat. I mean,
It's gonna be so good. I'm really hyped.
Me too.
Me too.
I'm just thinking of all the feminist memes we could come up with for this.
Yes.
Wait. And there's something about the Italian like Renaissance that always just makes me happy. So I'm very excited for feminist Italian Renaissance.
I know. I can't wait. Oh, okay, wait. This actually might be a lot shorter than I thought because I apparently
like 120 something.
I have like a long ass introduction for mine. Oh my god, she starts with a bitchy letter to him. I love this.
Lucrezia, we love you.
I think it does. Maybe it's a letter to her patron. I don't know. I hope she like personally attacks the man who published the other one. We can hope. So I'm really excited.
Yeah. But on that note, thank you so much everyone for tuning in. This was a really fun live show. Thank you, Cara and Julia. And we will see you in our next live show where we see Giuseppe destroyed by facts and logic.
I can't wait. Thank you for giving me an excuse to read this book again, Taylor, North and South. Like after just reading it last year, I'm like, I'm ready to do this again. So
that'll be me next year. I'll probably want to reread it.
Yes.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.